Hello and welcome to the second episode of the Art Department podcast with Emmanuel Shiu here and myself, Jan Urschel. And today we're going to talk about the entertainment industry and specifically about our jobs. We're both concept designers and there are always a lot of questions and a lot of people want to be a concept designer, concept artist, illustrator, work in the entertainment industry, video games, movies, book covers, what you name it. But there's often a lot of confusion as to like who does what and who do you work with and what kind of jobs are there really in the movie industry, pre-production, post-production, visual effects, visual development. So many different kind of names are being thrown around. And
the funny thing is, you were just talking about like I would go to a lot of classes and give talks, and the students would be like saying they want to be concept artists, but when you really ask them, they actually in the end they don't really understand the complexity and how many jobs and how to prepare for those jobs. How many different positions there are, like you just said, all those things. So, we are here to kind of run through the hierarchies and show people what it's all about. Hopefully this will be informative.
Yeah, I think we'll try to be as as comprehensive as possible, but of course there's going to be maybe like little areas here and there we miss out, and but we'll get through it. And Emmanuel did this amazing big crazy thing here of
turned out to be a lot more work than I thought it was.
Yeah, no, but it shows. It's good stuff. So here you have, this is all at once, right? So we have written down everything that we could think of and all the different things to talk about, and broke it down roughly into like the most common areas, which is like live action film, or commercials as well, animation, like animated movies, animated TV shows, video games, and also illustrations. And
this covers also environments, character, props design. That's all within that.
Right.
So I didn't get too specific on that.
Yeah, okay. We can drill down on all this stuff.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
we'll start from the left and then we'll get through everything. Is there anything you wanted to mention for this sheet?
No, this is just an overview, so that as long as you can always kind of scroll back to this and see for yourself if there's something that helps you. But I figured, an overview.
Exactly. For all our audio listeners, we have broken down the live action commercial category into pre-production and post-production art, and we're gonna get into detail to all of these later. But if you want to, of course, check out the slides, then you're welcome to check out the podcast on YouTube as well, of course. And so we'll start with live action, since that's where you have most of the experience, and also myself a little bit. So in the beginning, you wanted to talk a little bit about, for example, what is the union? No, wait. Sorry, I'm jumping ahead
so
here.
This is that's okay. This is just a quick hierarchy of how it works in most film.
Right.
Pre-production, art is you usually have, as a concept artist, you usually talk to either a production designer or you talk to an art director, and that's usually the tree, right? And then the production designer talks to the director.
Can you maybe, so this is specifically for pre-production, right? So if you work when there's like maybe a script, somebody has a script and you're getting hired to maybe do like a pitch that a director is preparing, and he has only like a production designer attached, and you're kind of in a really small team trying to figure out what this thing could look like. And then the director might try to get this thing greenlit, or even already when it's greenlit, you work in a bigger team, and then they're actually preparing to actually figure out all the details and everything. And then you might also have to get people like the set designer involved and everything. But could you maybe help people understand, like, what's the, like, I think for a video game, an art direction role is pretty clear what the art director does. But when it comes to a movie, like what's the difference between an art director and a production designer?
So a production designer, the big difference is that a production designer knows how to get sets built, right? Art
Okay.
director is more somebody who manages the crew and gets things done in terms of like getting assignments handed out and reviewing. And then sometimes on a big show, the art director is the go-between the production designer and
Okay.
you.
Right.
Because the production designer sometimes is really busy and he doesn't have time to sort of talk to like 15 artists.
Right.
So he'll give quick feedback to the art director talks to you. Now, on smaller shows or on shows where sometimes there is no art director, the
Right.
production designer will talk to you directly. But the big difference is the production designer needs to know how to build sets.
Right.
Because he knows from your design how this is going to be done. And then he also has to interface with set designers and then set builders and all that. That's all his domain. So he has to know all that. The art director doesn't have to do that.
Right. I mean, what would you say, like, also on like smaller shows, even there's no production designer, right? There's often like just a director who does everything.
Yeah. So,
Right.
okay. So on all shows, there will be a production designer no matter how small, usually, because they also understand that they don't know all the art stuff and they need help. But on pitches, which is kind of a pre-production as well, sometimes you will get to work directly with the director.
Right.
But that's pretty rare.
That's pretty rare, right?
Yeah, it doesn't happen very often.
Yeah.
So
would you say in general that like the clearer the hierarchy, the less middlemen are involved, that's a better way to work? Like, let's say if there's like in the middle between the production designer and you, there's like an art manager or like a concept manager or like a lead and somebody else. So like multiple levels that it has to go.
Yeah. So for games, that is more of a problem.
Okay.
Because you have more it's like the telephone game, right? The more people you're talking down the line, the more it gets messed up and the more people you have to please, and it can get to be a little bit more messy. Of course, working the director is the best, but but you work with a director, and a lot of times they're not artists. They also might be very hard to work with. So the production designer is a buffer.
Right.
He can help you sort of get things approved, and he kind of knows the director already.
Right.
So they have already a language. But if you just step in with a director, it can be really difficult, or it can be really cool. It just depends.
Yeah, it depends on the people, right? Yeah, that's good. Cool. Yeah, we'll have a similar breakdown, a bit adjusted for all the other kind of industries later on. But yeah, that's a good breakdown.
Okay.
Let's
go forward.
Okay.
Whoa.
Sorry, one too fast. So yeah, let's talk about this mystical.
Yeah.
thing,
So so this is the only, this is live action specific, obviously.
Right.
But
and for the US, right? For the US.
And for the US, yes. So this is the union. The Art Directors Guild is a union, and for most films that are past a pitch stage, they are unionized, and basically you have to be in a union to work on the films. So that is usually the rule of what it is, right? And it's a really hard to get into guild. There's Art Directors Guild is incredibly difficult to get in. At this point, there is really only a couple ways you can get in. One is to be grandfathered in, which means you're working on some kind of pitch, some kind of thing that hasn't gone union yet, and then it becomes union, so you get grandfathered in. That's usually not going to happen. It's very rare, but it can happen. The other way is there is this sort of what they call a superstar clause. Basically what it means is that they can get one person in per show, no questions asked.
Oh, okay.
right? So that's the second way. And of course, that's a sort of a guaranteed way, but most of these shows already have their one, they get one person in the
Right,
union.
right,
So it's
right.
very difficult. And then the third way is what we call an off roster hire, meaning you're not on the roster and you're not in the union. So in order to get you in, they need to call everybody in the union with your job description and title and ask if they're working. Because if they are, then they have to hire those people. So it's very, very, very difficult to get yourself hired because nobody wants to make those calls. It's like a million calls, and
Yeah.
you have to prove a lot of things before they can get you in, and it's very, very difficult. And I've had many times where I almost was able to get in, and they go, I don't want to. We don't want to make those calls. Forget it. We'll just hire somebody else. It's happened
Oh
to me
man, yeah, yeah,
so
yeah.
many times. I mean, I don't know. Has that ever happened to you?
No, no, no. I mean, I don't think I ever was even close to getting in there. I mean, don't you have to be an American or live in America
Um,
to be considered?
you, I don't know that. I don't know. I don't think you. I don't know. I really don't know. I think you have to be a resident. Yes, probably, but you don't have to be an American.
Right.
Don't quote me on that because I'm not sure. But
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
all I know is that for me, it was super difficult.
I mean, nobody ever
It took me
has. Yeah.
6 years.
6 years. 6 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. And how did you get in the end? Grandfathered in
So
or?
in the end, I was the clause where they could get one person in.
Superstar. You're the superstar.
It's like a director's pick or whatever you want to call it.
Director's pick.
And it just happened on Thor.
Oh, nice.
They I would
Right.
the production designer seemed to like my work, and
Right.
I'm grateful for what happened, and that's how it happened. But it's and so if once you get the director's pick and you go in, you have to work 30 days within that year in order to be part of the union. You can't just you're not just in, so you have to work 30 days.
Are there any
that's the-
requirements like that you have to fulfill on a yearly basis in order to stay a member of the guild? Do you have to
No,
pay
you just have
anything,
to
or-
pay the union dues. Well,
Okay.
first the union, the first year you have initiation fees, which are quite high. So just so you know, they are about $8,000. So it's quite high. But once you make enough hours, you make insurance, and making insurance means you don't have to pay for insurance. So
that's good.
it kind of evens out, and then and then you also have a pension for when you retire.
Nice.
So there are real benefits to the union, but the
Right.
problem is you will also scramble to make hours, which is a lot of people do that because you have to make 400 hours every half a year.
Okay.
So that's like roughly working 2 months. But
Okay.
the problem with us is that you're always freelancing and your projects don't really go that long.
Right. Right.
So stability is an issue.
So is there like do you get any? So once you're in the union, like do you automatically get jobs? Are you in some kind of
No,
database
I mean
or like?
you're on a database, and you're on what they call an availability list. So you're on the list of being available.
Okay.
Now, that's wonderful and all, but most of the people don't look at any database. They just go to their crew that they know. Right? I mean, so XYZ production designer is going to want his team from the last movie that he liked, right? So a lot of films end up being just picking people that they know.
Right.
And if the guy that he wants is not available, then what he's going to do is say, okay, we'll have a spot open. Do you have any recommendations?
Right.
So it always goes like that.
Right.
And that's why it's super difficult to get in,
Right.
Yeah.
So just being inside the union does not guarantee anything, right? You still got to network, you got to do your job well, you got to be good to work with, you got to stay on top of things, right? So yeah.
Yeah, the big thing with the union is that it can prevent you from working on a film, because before I was in the union, I mean, I would get emails and then, great, love your stuff. Are you in the union? No. Never hear from them again. That's happened to me at least 10 times.
Okay.
and over the years, and it got me really discouraged because I was like, well, how am I ever supposed to get into this? So I would call the union and say, how am I supposed to get into this union? And then they say, well, sorry, but that's how it is. And I'm like, great.
That's how it is. Do you feel like it's more difficult these days to get in than it was before?
No, I don't think it's more difficult. If anything, I think it's a little easier.
Okay.
Just because when I got in, they had just started the director's pick.
Mm-hmm.
Like before that, I was asking, there's no such thing. It was only
Okay.
getting grandfathered in
Uh-huh.
or that off-roster hire, which no one wants to do.
Right.
So I thought, okay, I'm screwed. I forget it. I'm just gonna go somewhere else. Or you can work on the movies, but in a post-production, which we'll get to.
Do you think, I mean, we're going to talk about this probably as well, but I mean, being in the union is not the only way to work on a movie, since there's also a lot of people that are working in, let's say, in the UK and London, that has a strong movie industry now, and there's a lot of productions that move their even their concept artists into areas like Budapest or Bucharest or whatever, where they shoot a lot of stuff like Dune and Halo and God knows what. So how do you think that like with all these kind of things popping up, it's gotten more difficult overall to compete in this field, or?
Well, I don't know that it's really that much more difficult. I think it's because different countries have their own things, right? So if you go to Vancouver, there's also a union there, but I don't think it's as hard to get in.
Okay.
And then you go to London. I don't think there is any there, but there's a lot of post houses, and so you can work on films. I mean, there's a lot of places that can hire for film, but if you want to be in California, especially if it's within the jurisdiction of the Art Directors Guild, you're going to have to be in there. Unless, now this is the one thing that most people don't tell you, is that you can, there is sometimes when they hire people from, like, say, Europe or somewhere remote, they will try to hire you as a consultant.
Right.
In which case they can kind of bypass that.
Right.
But the thing is that is tricky because the union also doesn't like that.
That's true. Yeah.
And I have to be honest. This is what I see happening more and more now, is that a lot of the places, like the people in the union, like me, is losing work to some of the effects houses.
Right.
Because the effects houses, essentially is saying, okay, we can do the concept art for you for really cheap or free, provided you give us the visual effects work.
Right.
Because then they can make it back on the back end, right? So, but that, you can't compete with free, right?
Yeah, of course not.
So because I've been on shows where I'm like, oh man, like my production designer will tell me, well, sorry, we gotta let you go because how do you argue with, they're gonna give us their whole art department and it's free.
Right. Yeah, that's difficult. Yeah.
So that's kind of, some of that's happening. So
it's good to know that. I mean, it's important to know that like the pre-production budget and the post-production budget are two completely different things. And there might be enough in the beginning for you, and the same company that tries to push for post might push for pre-production, but often, like a lot of people doing pre-production, are pushing also to get more jobs in the post-production, the VFX area, to continue to be employed for the same production. And then
it's just a weird situation sometimes, and you just kind of have to try to navigate it. But if you want to do pre-production, which is basically all the sort of blue sky to designing the set, all that stuff, then you're pretty much going to have to be in this union. If you're in the US, let's say. If you're somewhere else, then have to see how that goes.
Makes sense. Yeah, that is interesting.
But let's keep going with this.
I always thought like art director skills, like everybody's an art director, right? But it actually doesn't mean that, right? So,
well, the Art Directors Guild actually encompasses matte painters, art directors, illustrators, and production designers.
Right. That's good to know. Yeah, it's I think just an interesting term. But I mean, it's like saying there's a writers guild, right? An actors guild.
Yeah.
So all
kinds of guilds.
Yeah, cool. Okay, so now we're getting into some juicy pieces of artwork. You can always see who it was done by, and you can look these guys up. They're all super professionals and friends. Do you want to say anything to these guys here?
So I mean, so this is Robbie Consing, and I love his stuff. And I asked him, hey, can I just share some of your stuff? And I just wanted people to see there is storyboard art. That's a very big thing. So these are
storyboards,
as a first step. Yeah, and the storyboard artist usually works directly with the director. And they come up with all these sequences, and us as concept guys, we get a lot of their storyboards to sort of paint up, sometimes, or at least go off. So, so that's I just put it in there because I think that's an important part of it,
Yeah, I think a lot of concept artists are also being asked, or like if you can also do storyboards, that's often like a plus, right? Not to take jobs away from dedicated storyboard artists, but sometimes I think they will ask for like little scene breakdowns, and you have to do like multiple shots quickly in however you can. So I've seen a lot of that kind of stuff done on various Star Wars movies directly by concept artists.
Yeah, I mean sometimes if a frame, if director has talked to me, I love this frame. Can you just really make a good painting out of it, and maybe put that design in the back a little bit stronger, so something like that.
That becomes
lighting.
A key frame, right? That becomes a key frame.
So that's why this is so important, and these guys are amazing.
Oh yeah, definitely.
So I just wanted to include that in there, and and just in case people are looking through this. I mean, I'm not including every single thing out there. Obviously, different kind of art, all this.
Yeah.
It's just a rough general idea.
Yeah, of course. There's a lot more. Yeah, definitely. All
right, let's go next.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, okay.
Yeah. So I mean, this is George Hall. He did stuff for Guardians of the Galaxy.
Yeah, everybody should know
this is what it's for, and just vehicle designs. This is a big part of your presentation.
Right.
I put it in there because he's also a traditional artist.
Right.
And a lot of times he'll draw and marker and still do that kind of stuff, and it's not dead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, this is from like what, 2000, I can't read it, 2014, 15
maybe?
I mean,
this is the first or second?
The second one.
Second one. And it's just, good design is good design, and presentation is pretty. I always love George's presentation, and he can, of course, he can paint this up full.
Right.
But I wanted to show this just so that people could see, well, you can have a style, and it's still needed.
So I think that's a question that comes up a lot, right? Like people are always like, oh, which skills should I learn? Like is drawing dead or whatever, right? I'm wondering though, right? How applicable do you think this is in general for people? Like, should people still invest in a lot of drawing, or like, would you say these kind of that you are able to present hand-drawn stuff with like marker sketches, like, do you think that is reserved to people that are getting hired specifically, like somebody like George Hull? Like, do you like? I'm sure he gets hired because he can do that. But
of course,
do you think the average person that is coming in and has like maybe not that much experience, and they start doing like marker sketches, do you think they'll be like thrown out right away, and they're like, can you like put this away now?
I don't know that they'll be thrown out. I mean, the thing for me is good design is good design.
Yeah.
There's no other way to say that. And no matter how you choose to present it is a presentation method, but that said, you have to really look at who you're working with. Some directors will see the sketches and say, I don't understand it, but they don't really, they don't know how to look at it. And they'll just say, I don't like it. And it's not because they don't like it. It's because they don't understand it. And so you have to know who you're dealing with. And if your production designer or director likes that, like say when I was on The Matrix, Lana, the director, would respond better to drawings.
That's interesting.
So you have to. So then I had to start going back and brushing up on my drawing.
Oh no, all those dusty pencils.
And yeah, totally. And the thing is, it cannot hurt you to be better at drawing. It cannot. But in this day and age, you also need to know how to make things more realistic. If your director needs that. So I think first and foremost, design sense. And how, if you can do it this way, great. I don't think that this is dead, but I think it depends on who you show.
You should be able to design with the simplest tools possible, but you should basically be able to take this pencil drawing and bring it into a fully fleshed 3D model keyframe thing, right? What George also does.
And George can do that,
of course,
so he can do it all.
I think so. And what you're saying is basically like whether or not you present those sketches, that depends on how well you know the director, how well they will respond to that.
Or the production designer, because most times the production designers, they are they choose what they show the director, right? Because they know the director. So they might tell you, hey, look, this is, can you paint this up more, realistic or something? Because they know, okay, but the director doesn't want to see sketches. Or what he considers sketches, or other times he want that.
It also, it really comes down to really trying to do research, I think, on the people you work with a little bit. Like try to be a bit of a stalker, right? So try to understand, is your production designer, like what's his background? Is he like a fine artist? Is he an architect? Is he God knows what, right? Is he like from like a physical prop maker? I don't know. These people, like a photographer,
do your research.
They come from anywhere, and depending on what their background is, they like to look at different things, right?
Do your research. I mean, it's like I gave the example of I give the example of this Hellboy. I was on Hellboy, and we were having some hard time getting things approved. So I went home and I watched Blade 2, the commentary. The commentary. And so Guillermo del Toro basically tells you everything he likes, the palette he likes, the objects he likes, he's what he loves, what he grew up playing with. And I put all that stuff into the next design and they got approved. So
there you go. That's how you work smart.
It's just homework, and it's
a
little bit of respect, right? I mean, if you know Denis Villeneuve and he's working on Blade Runner, and you know that he likes things simple. If you watch The Arrival, Blade Runner, he's not going to make things over complex, and that's his style. Very simple frames. So don't make it really super busy, because he's not going to like it. So that's the thing.
Very, very good point.
And so it's really good idea. I mean, to be aware of these things. But I'm glad you brought that up, though.
That's good. That's good.
All right, let's keep moving.
What do we have here?
We got a lot of stuff to go.
Let's go a bit faster here. Otherwise, we're going to sit here tomorrow.
So I mean, this is just some keyframe art. This one's for Ready Player One.
Right, the DeLorean here.
It's the scene where he gets the copper key, and a lot of times you'll be asked to say, okay, we want this fountain, and we want this kind of feel, and this is what happens. Can you visualize it for us? And so
what's this?
So I did.
Go ahead.
So I did. I just this is one of those cases where you have to try to make it a little bit more visually realistic, because if you don't do that, I was constantly asked to make it more tight.
Oh, okay. Was this based on a just a description you got from your production designer, or was this
Yeah,
based
yeah.
on
I mean,
a
he just said, "Oh, some kind of
right, right, right,
fountain in the middle,
right.
and then some kind of park, and yeah."
What do you think
And
they put most emphasis on? Like, do they want to see like basically the story moment and how it feels, or do you
see,
think they
that's the thing is nowadays. That's when I was preparing this. I'm like, man, everything feels like key art nowadays. But the
yeah,
truth
yeah,
of it is, they want it all in one frame
right,
because they took this frame. I mean, I was surprised actually when I watched the movie. It's pretty much
yeah,
like
yeah,
this, and they just take this frame. I did two frames, like this frame, and then I think I did it from the other angle. But they took it and they just gave it to the visual effects house, and then they figured out the rest.
and then that's how it ends up in the movie. I mean,
Yeah,
that's
I
like
mean,
lucky, right? That's like
well, no, that actually happens a lot
yeah,
like
yeah.
that. I
Oh,
mean, most
okay,
of my stuff happened like that. I mean, they get
cool.
this thing, and then the people interpret what you do.
Mm-hmm.
And people say, oh, you give them the model. Nobody's really asked me for the models.
Right. Do you feel
Nobody
like how
cares.
do do you feel like, I mean, there's always an ambivalent feeling oftentimes about how your concept art is being translated onto the big screen because there's so many people involved. And do you feel personally like better if your what you had in mind is being translated like very very close to that, or do you even care? Should
I
should
think
we care? Right?
at the beginning, I was like, I would go and watch the movie with like bated breath and come
Yeah,
on, let
yeah,
me
yeah.
see this. After a while, you care, but you also realize that, like you said, there's so many people in it
Right.
that you can't expect your thing to come through. You're part of the chain. You're helping figure out stuff. The next person who takes yours will figure out
Right.
that. And it just goes on and on and on like that. So in the end, now it's a given that it probably will change.
Right.
If it stays the same, I will be surprised.
Right.
Which is, when we're looking at this one that you did, why don't you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, my turn. Yeah, that was done for Captain Marvel. I don't have as much opportunities to work on these big movies as you have. Because I'm not in the US, I'm not in the guild or anything. So this was one of those lucky moments where a couple of guys from Europe actually managed to be able to work on Captain Marvel. Which also brings me to another thing that if you work for like Disney and one of its many subsidiaries, whether it be like Star Wars, Marvel, Pixar, they all have their own art department, right? With their own guys, a visual development department, but they actually work completely separate from the people that are getting hired by the production designer. At least that was
Yeah.
my experience. So we working with the production designer on our stuff, and then there's the visual development team inside Marvel that also works on stuff.
Yeah.
But
Mostly the guys inside Marvel, they're doing mostly character
yeah,
stuff,
they're doing
though.
characters, keyframes, all those iconic things
Yeah.
that they do really well, and then
Mhm.
we're helping more
Yeah.
the production designer flesh out like all the other things that I guess are more open to interpretation, right? I mean, you do have the
Yeah. Yeah.
legacy
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
the comics, and Star Wars. You even have a stronger legacy of like Ralph McQuarrie and the world they established. So then there needs to be people and like doing this kind of stuff who really understand what it's about.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I mean, with this kind of stuff, I guess they're like a bit more like, okay, we're pretty open to how the city will look. Let's try and see, right? What else can I say to this? Like often these kind of things are like a collaboration effort. So the ships I got from a different artist. I think Pablo Carpio Dominguez, who worked with me on that, they provided those ships, and I did the city, and this is the approach that we did for
Yeah,
that.
because you did a whole bunch of these, right?
Yeah, we did a whole bunch of these, and a kind of funny thing circles back to what you just said about don't get too attached and hoping for these things.
Yeah, so
to
in the end, did
approach.
this come through?
I don't think so. Like we worked pretty extensively over like 6 months, maybe on like this alien city, and I think in the end, it was like maybe like 2 or 3 minutes of movie time, and then they cut to like Earth, and that was it. So we're all like, what? Like,
Well,
hold
that
on.
happens a lot.
Yeah. The blood, sweat, and tears. But you cannot control what happens, right? In the end, they said like maybe it didn't look good, maybe it didn't work out, maybe somebody changed their mind, maybe the test screening went bad, and they thought like, okay, this doesn't flow well with the overall character development, right? It's interesting because this show was also, I mean, it's Marvel after all, but the directors were, I think, from a sitcom background. It was like a duo, and they did some like I think romantic comedies before. And it's interesting how the dynamic changes once you have not someone like Ridley Scott, who's very like experienced with this kind of type of movie, right? And then you have somebody who knows that they have to put the stuff in, but really wants to spend their time on fleshing out the characters and their arcs, right? So you always gotta know again who you work with, right? Oh, marketing art. That was an interesting piece, which was actually done for Ghost in the Shell, but for the marketing effort. So while I tried my best to kind of like make it appear as a movie frame, I also snuck in there some stylistically something from the 1995 anime. They said they wanted to be their own thing, and I think this is where the final fight happens. But I tried to kind of like strike a middle way between something more stylized. But they were cool with it, so that was okay.
And in marketing art, isn't it? Because I've done some marketing art, and it's usually really high res, really tight. Because they sometimes they will have to print it, or they're thinking of it depends. So that's you find a big difference, right, on that.
You have also, I feel like you have more time to do it.
More time.
I had a few days to do this instead of just a few hours like you often have. And it was all a bit more relaxed because I was working with the marketing department.
So on the previous one, how long did that take you?
That one was basically just wait, does it work? My controls, that one, I mean, basically at the end of the day you should have something, and then maybe you get another another half day to touch it up. But of course I have to say that the city in the background is kind of what I worked on for a long time, and you cannot even see it properly here. But then the ship assets were from another guy, but the rest is done by me. And I think you have like a day and a half, and then you need to move on to something different, right? I mean, if it doesn't work, then you make another one. If it doesn't work,
but I mean, I think talking about time frames is a good thing, because I think a lot of people watching this are wondering, well, what does it mean?
Right.
How long does it take? Because I think they need to also get to a point where they understand, okay, this is, you need to work at a certain pace to be able to be at this. Because if you do really great looking work, but it takes you 2 weeks,
right,
it's still that's gonna be a problem.
Do you have any, like, because a lot of people, I think, don't know how long stuff takes them.
I'd say that you can right now. What I've noticed on at least on pre-production films, pretty much you're gonna have to daily have stuff.
Right.
Like if you get an assignment today, they want to see sketches by tomorrow. Right. Like a whole bunch of ideas and stuff, and then you'll have time to sort of hone it in.
Yeah, exactly.
But I mean, that can be very stressful.
No, that's exactly right. It can be very stressful, but I think in order to get to that point, I think you need to, I think, really not just indulge in your paintings and your personal stuff, but also do exercises like timing yourself and really force yourself to have something presentable by a certain deadline, right?
Yes and no. I depends on. I think depends on where you are in your journey, right? Because personally, I think if you first of all is to get a good design sense. The better you are at design and composition and lighting, then the faster you can go. But the problem is you can't really kind of just go, because I've seen a lot of people just go fast.
Okay.
And then they go fast, but they never really learn the design thing. So you may be able to do 10 sketches, but none of them look very good. So then then what are you going to do? It's because you're not going to be hired again.
Right. That will.
Versus, I'd rather you do one sketch.
Right.
That's
right.
sweet. You know. Of course, that's the training wise. You should probably train more in just doing more, and you'll get faster.
Yeah, you get it faster eventually. Yeah.
Yeah,
that's true.
So, what we're looking at here is post-production now. Like post-production meaning visual effects houses, right? So what that means is, places like Method, Frame Store, Scanline, places that do the visual effects.
Right.
Now, most visual effects houses have a branch, an art department.
Right.
And that art department supplies the rest of, like matte painting, modeling, texturing. Right. They supply art for those departments because a lot of times when they get a shot, like a sequence. So in this case, Game of Thrones, this was for Method Studios, or Atomic Fiction, but now they're bought by Method, so they're Method. So what they get is like on the left, they get this film plate, and the director said, hey, we need a burned out camp. We need a whole bunch of mountains in the background.
Right.
We didn't foresee doing concept art for this, so there's nothing. So happens. You guys will have to figure it out.
Right.
And that's happens a lot in visual effects places. That's why they need an art department.
Right.
And if they don't, or if their art department's busy, or if they don't have one, then they will hire out contractors or freelancers like me.
Right.
Or like you, or like anybody. So the thing is, what you're going to get a lot of times is film plates now, right? You're not working really from scratch.
Right.
You're getting a film plate, and they're saying, look at that, paint over that, because that's actually a plate, and show me versions of the mountain and blah, blah. So, on the left is the concept, which is, sort of, I did like maybe 5-6 versions of different mountains and different burn states and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
And yeah, so this is a very typical post-production pipeline.
Exactly.
And I think have you done stuff?
Oh yeah, a lot. Yeah, I work with Frame Store, NPC. Yeah.
Didn't you? What did you do for Robin Hood or something? Or
King Arthur.
King Arthur, right? Okay.
Yeah. Those movies are interesting. I know, but it's fun. I mean, sometimes it really varies the kind of things you get to do there. Sometimes, you get plates, and then you need to do set extensions and all this kind of stuff. And I think it often gets a bad reputation, even though it
can be quite fun.
Yeah, but more often than not, something you did actually will be a lot closer to what you did in the final film.
Yeah, because it's the last stage, right?
Exactly.
So that shot is going to be, they're going to follow this concept, most likely. And so the funny thing is, on that concept, I looked at, so in the end, Max Berman is the one who matte painted it.
Oh, okay, cool.
And it looks exactly like this.
Nice.
Exactly in feel. Obviously, he made a matte painting of it. So it looks much more realistic. Nice. But it's just amazing. And you're right. This is the stage where you can have something you do come all the way through. And also getting into these places is going to be easier because they actually have an art department that you can actually work at.
Right.
And that's you can, have benefits and all that kind of stuff. You're working at like a studio.
Regular employee, right?
Exactly. And it's actually a really, I would say it's always the best step for beginning artists.
Right.
Because for me, I got that when I was at the orphanage.
Right.
And I was a matte painter there. So whatever shots would come, some shots would be just matte painting, but then some shots would be like, well, we don't know what this looks like.
Right.
So then I get to do concept art. That's how I started practicing concept art. So I always suggest to people, this is a good way to go, and you learn how to do realistic things. Yeah. Because, whether they like it or not, nowadays everything is really about realism.
Right.
And it's just kind of how it is.
Right.
It's very rare that you get to push things a lot,
That's right.
But it happens.
Cool. Maybe. This is also post-production, right? I was just going to say, like, in that kind of stuff, in that kind of post-production, area, you do a lot of like effects, like lightnings and
Exactly.
clouds and
Yeah. Yeah.
storms and
I don't know. Have you done a lot of
oh
the
yeah,
effect
yeah.
stuff?
I mean, sometimes you even get like complete green screens, and then they just tell you like, oh, and there's all this like stuff flying around and lightning
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
lights.
So
So
this one, this thing, Ion Storm,
mm,
we want this,
right.
and it has to feel real, right? If you give
Mm,
them a quick sketchy thing, that it doesn't help them.
mm,
So put the ship in there, make a crazy Ion Storm.
right.
I did like versions and versions of these
Nice.
storms,
Yeah.
and but I mean, wormholes and
Yep.
lightning hits, all this stuff, explosions and stuff. That's a lot of, because what you have to understand is that you're trying to help the
Right.
studio, right? And the guy who's doing the sim for that effect doesn't know what it should look like.
Right.
But that's not his job, though. I
Right.
mean, his job is to say, you want that storm? I can make it.
Exactly. Right.
But if you don't show me that storm, I don't know what to make.
Exactly. Right.
So that's your job. You need to know that that's part of your job.
Indeed.
It's not always designing spaceships and castles and all
Right.
that kind of stuff. Most of the time, it's gonna be stuff like this. So
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
why I put it.
That's cool.
And
Another
this
plate.
is
Oh, okay.
yeah, Superman Returns.
Oh.
So a
Oh my God.
typical plate on the left is just what they shot,
Right.
and then the right is one version of a concept art. But
Right.
that it's just, you give them version to version, and they kind of just go, okay, yeah, I like that one, and then
Cool.
so then the matte painting team would paint that,
Right.
which is
Cool.
also my team. So
Right. Oh my God, commercial stuff. One of the few character stuff I did. I don't know actually if I would say that commercials these days is anything different than movies, since they have big budgets and they're doing more and more
but
daring
I
stuff.
would say one thing is that they are usually much more fast paced.
Oh my God, yeah, they want it. They want it
So-
Monday morning, and they call you on a Friday. Yeah, all
Well,
the
I mean,
time.
it's crazier than that. I mean, sometimes they'll be like, okay, we're doing this thing, and can you have it, like, I hire you in the morning, you have to have it by the end of the day.
Right.
And it's like,
That's
whoa.
true. Yeah, and they often are like, okay, it's good enough. Let's move on. Right.
Yeah,
Like,
pretty much it's like
You never-
they'll accept half done.
you never get anything finished. And this was
But
actually
on this
yeah.
one was different. On this one,
Yeah,
was
we had a lot of
different,
time. There
right?
was
This is where we met, right?
Yeah, that's where we met, 2013. Jesus, there was a commercial for Samsung for some soccer thing. So that, I don't know, some
Yeah.
all-star team plays against aliens, and I think it was like for like a tablet introduction. Like
I don't
I
remember,
think it
man.
was,
Seriously,
I have no
don't.
idea.
I don't even.
Terrible days.
But it was fun, and I remember seeing these guys, and I thought, well, it'd be nice to include some of that.
Yeah. Oh,
So
animation.
just to say, that's all the different. I know we kind of ran through the last ones, but at least you have an idea.
Yeah.
So now animation, yeah.
Animation. Have you done a lot of animation work?
I was at Image Movers,
Okay.
and we did 2 animated
Oh,
movies.
right.
So I've been on that.
Right.
So I have a good understanding of it. But honestly, I haven't, it's not my strength in terms of
Right.
going to, like working at a, like Pixar or Disney, or although Image Movers was owned by Disney. But for me, I think my style doesn't lend itself really well.
Right. I think in terms of the hierarchy, I think it's very similar, since I think Pixar and everything, they work like other movie studios, I think. I worked for Axis on some animated TV show. But yeah, so I think the main difference is really like a stylistical one, right?
Stylistic, but also they have a very specific way of doing things, and it's very story driven. Like that is the key, right? In visual effects or pre-production art, I would say that it's more about what that piece looks like, or what the environment looks like. But I find that in visual development, it's really about how this character environment piece supports the story, and they're really big into that. Even the colors, the color scripts, everything, it has to support the mood. I mean, there are similarities, but this is the big thing for visual development. That's why they call it visual development mean, that's the term that they use in animated film more than I've never used that term in live action or even.
I guess it comes from the fact that they really have 100% control over everything they do. They don't have to deal with
They're
actors.
one-stop
They don't
shop,
have
right?
to deal with environments. They make everything, right? They have full creative control. Yeah.
Exactly. So, and this is just an example. I mean, we'll probably go through this a lot faster because this is not our strength. I can tell you my understanding of it and to give you an overview. But, this is how some frames will be designed.
Right.
These are some sort of color script / look frames.
Right.
And this is done by Jason Shire. So it's some artist.
Yeah, he's a Netflix now production designer or something, right?
Yeah, super crazy. Nice guy, and so he did all these. This is for Kung Fu Panda,
right?
And if you go one more, like I forgot. I don't know what that one was for.
Oh, there's that one.
Like
sorry.
That's for God.
That Snowman movie. Let's leave it at that.
Yeah, Snowman movie. But a lot of times, you're gonna have to do color scripts. You're gonna have to do. They go anywhere from storyboards, color scripts to developing sets. But the set development, like go back one to this one. So a lot, like if you were to turn this in the pre-production or post-production live action, this will get you very far.
Yeah.
Most of the time, people will be like, "Okay, that's great. Now make a painting of it."
Yeah.
But in visual development, this is the most important part because they really want you to develop what that thing is, and then they want you to say, "Okay, well, what's the mood? What's the light? What's the palette? What's the color?" So that kind of goes like that.
Yeah, in a movie, I think it's more like, okay, this is where the camera is located, and we need to see what the camera sees, and let's move on, right? Unless you do like some stuff like spaceships that are being used in multiple different angles and everything. But cool. Yeah, it's a lot more about understanding of color, story moments.
And it's pushing the sort of style of it because every film will have its own unique style. Right. And then you kind of follow that style. It's like, Spider-Verse has its own style. And you have to have a really good understanding of, light, color, all that kind of stuff. But it's more pushed usually. Like this is like hyper real. And so, some things like Spider-Verse is a little bit more stylized, sort of, I wouldn't even call it cartoony, but everyone will have a different style. So I think, just understand that, this is kind of like the way it is in the hierarchy of how it works. You usually working with an art lead. That's usually the hierarchy. You're working with an art lead that also there is a production designer usually on these films.
Right.
So that, and then there's a director of that film altogether. So the hierarchy is not all that different.
Right.
But this is the kind of stuff that you would be responsible for. Of course, we may miss some things. Obviously, this is not our thing, but you'll get a general idea.
We'll get some specialists for that stuff if there's a lot of interest for this kind of industry.
If there's interest, put it in the comments. We'll grab some people who actually really are, like for me, I'm live action all the way.
Right.
But I have a general understanding of all the other things.
Right. Cool.
So anyway.
Yeah. Let's move on to the navigation in the slide thing is not working that well. I'm jumping around.
That's fine.
But let's move on to games, mobile, console, PC. Yeah. In terms of hierarchy, I guess, there's a few different kind of roles you actually have. There's not generally like a director, right? In that sense, it's more like a creative director, the term. And then, you're working with an art director now, or like a game designer, or even like a technical designer. And often there are big concept teams, and you have like a senior concept artist, of course, a junior as well, a lead concept artist that might be in between there. I've worked in studios and in freelance for a lot of big game companies, and yeah, there's a multitude of different people. You even have like environment artists like throwing their opinions in, and you might have to do jobs for them. The guys who actually build the levels and everything, the lighting guys, and there's really a wide variety of jobs inside the game development, because it's not as clearly like pre-production, production, post-production. It's more fluid than that, and you might, when you work for a game studio, have a lot of different things to do, anything from like a blue sky period to pre-production, and then helping to support the artists during the production, and with like lighting, paint overs, adjustments, and all sorts of things. So there's you're gonna have, I think, a lot more stuff to do, and that's why they, I guess, have a more permanent staff when it comes to concept artists, right?
Yeah, I mean, just so people know, blue sky means sort
right.
of this phase where you're just anything goes. You're trying to find the idea.
Yeah.
So anything kind of you can do, and then they'll hone it in. But yeah, I mean, this is the only sort of work that I feel like is kind of really different, because working with a game designer is very different, because you're having different needs, because a successful game is about game design,
right,
and nothing else. A
gameplay,
successful
right?
movie is about story, right? Same with animated movie. So working with a game designer and an art director and an environment lead, sometimes you have to work with them all at once. I mean, I've had meetings with 5 people, and you have those 5 people are arguing within each other, going,
of course.
Well, yeah, but how do I do that? I can't go there. I need some interest over there. And that guy's like, oh, no. So there's a lot of that is the sort of one side where I was a little bit like, whoa.
It's true. I mean, the art director wants to push the visual side. The gameplay, the game designer says like, yeah, but this place needs to be this big, and so the gameplay doesn't suffer. The technical director says, no, we can't do that. That's too many polygons, or like the NTLAs, blah blah blah, and like the CPU, blah blah, and like so you have to serve many masters in that.
It can get a little.
And depending on who,
it can get difficult. Yeah.
Depending on who is the strongest personality, that is often the person who wins in the end. And of course,
I tell you, I've worked on some that in the end I just said I can't, I just can't continue this, because they don't really know what they want. So everybody's, in the end, you please one person, and then somebody else will say, I don't like it. And then you have to do it again. And it becomes this loop that you're like, I mean,
often it's like the success or failure of a product, of a game in the end, depends very much on how well the team works together. And
that's why a lot of, the really good games, they have mostly all the stuff is already kind of hashed out before they hire any freelancers. So in-house teams, they'll be able to hash it out there, and if they need extra help, it's just kind of to support that style. They already know what they're doing. So yeah. Anyway, let's look at some. Let's look at some slides.
Yeah, we're jumping around. Oh, the Lost Planet. That was quite a while ago, no?
Yeah, it's a while ago. So Lost Planet 3, I mean, but I worked with, some of my ex-coworkers from Image Movers, and they were super awesome to work with. So it was pretty easy. It was kind of like, we need, these areas. I mean, in this project, they just said, hey, look, we need ideas. So just come up with cool ideas.
So that was very early on, I guess.
Yeah, it wasn't that early on. I mean, they were already kind of sort of knew where they wanted. It's just that this area hadn't really been touched in the game. So okay, yeah, cool. So I would just come up with ideas.
So, but there was already somewhat of a style guide, right? Since you say it was.
No, there wasn't really any. I mean, they just said to me, just come up with some cool ideas. That's all.
Okay, that's great.
And I think they did show me James Pack's, designs and drawings for another part, and it was kind of it's kind of this more realistic style anyway that he does. So I just kind of said, okay, I'll just go in that direction.
And something I did for Star Citizen. That was actually, I think, based on a very, very rough block out of the area, which then needed to get like a material, color, lighting, paths, and decals and ship in it and details and basically flesh it out.
Were you working for Cloud Imperium, or were you
Yeah, Cloud
working for
Imperium.
Squadron 42 in London? Or?
I think this one, oh God, I think this was already for the Foundry in Manchester. Yeah.
Oh, I see. Okay.
And yeah, I was really all about because I mean the game's visual bar has already been set, so you need to kind of match that or try to push it even a bit further, right? And so you need to really fit into the overall brand of the game already, especially with like something like this that is already like it's already out, it's already an alpha or beta or whatever. And so it's not really helping to define, like it's not like, oh, you can do whatever, right? It's like, okay, this is how the rest of this area looks like. You need to match it, and we want to do this and this with it. And can you put this ship in it and that kind of stuff. So it's figuring out how.
Yeah, I mean, so that's one example of, having to sort of, okay, you come in as a contractor, you're following what's been done. Like the stuff for Lost Planet before, it's just kind of like, well, come up with some ideas so we can make something cool.
Yeah.
So it's like two different.
Yeah,
but
definitely.
This is what you're gonna have to do.
And there was already a block out here, right? So it's like something you
so
get.
So somebody blocked it out for you.
Yeah, the gameplay is already set.
Okay.
So
this is an actual level. They wanted you to say, hey,
beautify, basically. Yeah.
Okay,
but I mean, I don't know how much there was in terms of gameplay, or if it's just because with a lot of with these like open world games, there's not necessarily like always scripted moments, right? It's a lot of just like, oh, you go there, you go up to the ship, and then that space has a function, but it's not necessarily like, okay, there needs to be a cover here, it needs to be this high, you need to hide behind there, the enemy is coming from there, this needs to be transparent, blah blah blah, all these kind of things that you often have to consider when
they just want to get
gameplay.
A general feel.
It's just like a general feel, like this could be like a hangar design that they can then replicate a couple of times because they have to have so much content. And it can also be like a benchmark in terms of the visuals. It's something you did also for Star Citizen.
Yeah.
A lot of stuff.
So this is, this is probably the first things I did for Star Citizen.
Right,
That's why I included it in here because, this one was, I mean, just they needed a ship and it was complete blue sky.
Oh yeah.
Like just go do a ship,
right?
And if it's cool, then we'll sell it.
Yeah,
and pretty much that was that.
They did the concept sale, but I don't think it exists.
It still
yet.
hasn't been built.
Yeah.
So they did the concept sale. I mean, this was like way back then. I mean, this got to be at least 5 years old at least.
Yeah, I think so at least.
And then I think the next one, the next slide.
Oh, yeah, that's the one I did.
That's the. Yeah, I mean, because that's funny because they kind of go together.
Yeah, so this is the small brother of this other one. The other one is like a merchant ship, and this one is kind of like a small attack vessel, but it's supposed to be for the same alien race. So I actually got, I think they said like, oh, we have this ship done, but we need to design something that goes with it in terms. They had some general pointers for me in terms of like, oh, we like this kind of lighting, we like this kind of material and these kind of shapes, but so what would like an attack style ship look like, right? And at the same time, because I think they did a concept sale of that ship, but they hadn't actually built it, so they were still open to experiment within those parameters. And with Star Citizen, it's funny because you get like, I'm sure you got it as well, you get like a piece of lore, like a breakdown of what this race is about. So they give you like the history and everything, right? And it's quite funny and interesting how deep they dive into this kind of fan fiction almost, right? So yeah, I mean this one,
and that's the one thing that people will need to keep in mind is that a lot of people who are in games are very passionate about games.
Oh yeah.
And they're very into sort of nerding out on the facts.
If you design
and
something
the
for
made
like
up lore, yeah.
If you design something for Star Wars, you have to deal with Star Wars fans.
Yeah, and these guys are the same. Like they have
definitely.
their own lore, and you're going to have to understand, like how it works. But a lot of times when you look at a shot like this, you're not only selling the shot, you're also selling the ship. But it's all packaged in one.
Yeah,
because a lot of people don't understand that. Everything looks finished and that's it. But but the truth is, if you don't do that, a lot of people won't understand it, and it's easier to sell this, and then give them an orthographic if they need it.
Exactly. I mean, we did it completely in reverse, of course, of what the people saw, right? The people see the marketing materials and they think that comes first. But of course, we spent a month before to actually flesh out this ship completely inside and outside, with all mechanical features and size and everything that goes with it. And that's why actually doing these marketing shots in the end goes super quick. But of course, you have a crazy asset that you built for a long time, and then you can just pump out shot after shot. And like you said, the purpose of these images is to sell the idea of the ship, that, oh, this is something I want to fly in, this is something I want to use, I want to go to these planets, even though they don't exist, right? But you can imagine how this thing cruises and lands, and the kind of sounds it makes and everything, like, and the better you can imagine those features and translate them into something visual, the better also your audience can understand what how this will work. And the good thing was with this one that there was really nothing much out there, so the people were open to get like a completely different kind of ship. Whereas if you do something for a really established kind of alien race or game or franchise, then it's going to be a lot harder to deal with fans. Yeah, definitely. But
I think this all worked out. But I mean, I think people understand too. What happens. But I mean, a lot of times, just understand that when you're doing game stuff, it's about gameplay as well.
Yeah, definitely.
It's like looking at this radar dish. It's about what happens in the dish, how does it work, things like that. So there's we're showing you a lot of finished images because a lot of the times when I do the sketches and the side views and stuff like that, it's not really for presentation.
No.
Yeah. It's mainly just a couple quick sketch and we talk about it, and then
exactly.
In this case, they have the whole model. So but I mean, for this, why don't you talk about this?
Yeah. I did. I mean, this was actually there's a lot of gameplay actually here involved. Even though it's a finished looking painting, there's a ton of gameplay considerations that were given, and technical considerations actually by the art director. So this is for the fighting game from the Mortal Kombat developers, NetherRealm, and they did this DC fighting game. And so this is basically because it's like it's in 3D, but it's like it looks like 2D, right? It's like it has depth to it, but you basically just panning left and right with the camera, maybe up and down. So it has to have the entire possible frame that the camera can go. Of course, you have that 16:9 framing from the TV, but then you need to imagine that framing can go all the way to the left, all the way to the right. So the main area of focus has to be, of course, like in the middle. And then you also have to have different kinds of varied elements to the outside, but it has to be clear that there's an end to this fighting stage. And it should look somewhat natural, but also like a bit darker and uninteresting. And then you have all these elements that you actually have free I had free reign in that regard, that I could choose the kind of things that would fit into the swamp. But it had to be items that Superman or Batman in this case can actually pick up and throw at each other, or like you could imagine he's like taking that barrel and throws it at him, or there is like a crocodile somewhere that could like come out and devour him. And or like something could come out of the house, or the tree could fall down, or he would slam him into the truck and hit that hood on him. I don't know, like all these kind of things you need to imagine, because you're also trying to feed the idea of what kind of gameplay could be in there, right? It's on a very basic level, to be honest. It's not like you have to think very deeply about it, but it's just like, how can the visuals and the props here support the gameplay in the end?
Right.
So yeah, that was that.
Yeah. So I mean, but
Okay.
so anyway, so that's just the game section.
Yeah.
And, I think, that's a good idea. People get a good idea.
Yeah,
of
I
what,
think the biggest difference is really like the consideration story versus gameplay, right? What you said before compared to movies. So illustrations, book covers, editorials.
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to include just a section of things that are sort of miscellaneous, right? I mean, these are more niche markets. But if you as a concept artist or artist, you this is a definitely viable route, for illustration. So book covers, right? So this is Mark's book covers, and that is definitely something that exists, and you can get work doing. I've done some book covers, but very little, and I haven't really tapped into that a whole lot.
I think there's always that discussion about illustration versus concept art, and I think it's something I don't know if we want to dive into that at some other point, because it's a whole different long discussion. But often, like, I think illustration is just something mentioned as like making really fantastical, nice paintings that are already based on other people's ideas. So that
I think a lot of people refer illustration to like fantasy.
But I mean, in this case, they kind of Mark serves both, right? He comes up with the idea and illustrates it, right?
Yeah.
So,
I think a lot of people look at illustration and say, well, editorial illustration is traditional illustration, right? It's solving a problem for the client, using an illustrative process. But even when I'm in the Art Directors Guild, I mean, my classification is illustrator, so it's so vague.
It's often used
I just think that illustration is just putting an idea into a form into a visual form.
Right.
And that could really work for anything. Like you could be an illustrator in games,
right.
But it's just I think it's a wording that I think some people just need to know. Okay, unfortunately, in games you have to understand game design.
Right.
So a lot of people go, then maybe I'm a designer, concept designer. Then so it's just a way to word it. But I think these sections, like this is some people just work on Magic the Gathering cards, and this is Jonas Duro, and he's been doing this for like 10 years more, and a lot of people this is a very good ongoing gig for them.
Right.
But it's more fantasy based.
Right. It's often more fantasy based, right?
Yeah. So this is just like I threw this in as an editorial.
Right. That was for National Geographic, right?
No, this is for Bloomberg.
Bloomberg. Okay.
And they did some kind of space edition magazine for that for that month, and I was asked to illustrate for this
nice.
this I guess asteroid that was coming in. This is an actual asteroid, so I had to research it and do all this stuff, and then put a more illustrative spin to it. But this is an example of doing your stuff and having it in a magazine.
It's rather rare though that you get these kind of jobs, right?
It's rare.
It doesn't happen that often.
It's rare, but it can happen.
Yeah, definitely.
But if you do like this, you can do more of it and sort of search it out. I mean, they came to me, but I think if you search it out, you could you could have this subsection. You could do like some magazine editorial. You could do some book covers, and you could do some cards, and that could probably sustain you.
Yeah, definitely. I like that they put your name really big on here. That's really nice.
Yeah, and that's also rare.
Yeah, that's really rare. Like usually you have like a tiny like footnote or like in the imprint or whatever.
But it was cool to do. So and this is just an example of doing your work. Like this was personal work. So I did all this personal work, and then this band came and licensed my work.
Nice.
And said, well, we want to put it on the CD and the box cover and all this kind of stuff. So there's also that. So it's kind of wide what you can do. Books, you can do a lot of different things.
Actually, my first job out of school was that I did a band cover and leaflet for a German heavy metal band.
Oh wow.
Yeah, I don't know if anybody will still find that. That was like 10 years ago. But yeah, so I did those as
Somebody
well.
will
Yeah.
find it.
Yeah, the music is German heavy metal. That's so I don't know. You have to be into that, I guess. But yeah, these kind of things can happen everywhere, right? So I did like an image for one of my Patreons, and that image was later picked up by Samsung, and they commissioned me to do some changes to it to fit their new brand. But that ended up on all the new gaming monitors as a marketing piece. So yeah, it can happen, right? You never know. So they licensed it, and we changed it a little bit, and so this kind of stuff
Yeah, so I
happens.
mean that's totally, this miscellaneous, a
Yeah.
lot of things, it can be a lot more than what we put,
Oh
but
yeah, yeah,
as a
definitely.
general quick glance example of all this stuff, this is just kind of like that could be
Yeah.
some of the things. At least these are some of the things that we've done,
Yeah,
or
we've
things
done
that we know
experienced.
of.
Yeah.
But you can already see that there's so many different
Right.
sort of, you know, places you can work,
Right.
and their requirements,
Yeah.
like basic requirements.
I
And
mean, yeah.
yeah,
I mean, this is basically just like to round it off here and to finish it. We had been talking for quite a while now, and I think everybody's getting
yeah.
bored. But I mean, these are the things that
No.
means like working on projects, working inside the industry on bigger things, right? I mean, then there's the entire section of actually trying to do your own thing, right? Doing your own movies, doing your own. Um, uh, uh, doing it by your own, right, and or trying to sell your own style, right? You can also go it on your own. But I mean, this is really what it pertains to, like working on big projects or smaller projects in the various areas of this industry, right? It's always changing. Like we haven't even touched on like VR, AR, and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But that
I
will
mean,
come
because
as well,
that,
right? So
definitely that would fall into the niche categories.
yeah,
But
exactly.
in the end, this is the major sort of,
Right,
live action animation,
right,
games, and illustration
right.
are the four major
Yeah,
pillars kind
exactly.
of thing. And, you can kind of look at what vibes with you.
Yeah, and
And then
then
you can at least have an idea. Like if you want to do live action film, you need to understand that there's a union. You
yeah.
understand that there's pre and post production,
Exactly. But then
animation, visual, stuff like that.
you
Yeah.
go off into related stuff like theme parks, right? You go into like even
Yeah, there's that. Yeah.
the medical industry, right? They sometimes use designers from specifically searching for designers from our field to get a new vibe into it, or like
Yeah.
robotics firms like SpaceX hiring like people from Blizzard, or like architectural companies looking for
Hmm.
a different feel, right? They're all like tired of the general kind of stuff that you get from architectural visualization firms, and they're looking for like a more offbeat kind of spin on things, right? So there's a lot more that you can
Yeah, and
look
I think
into,
that,
right?
yeah, the main thing is for most people who I think are actually watching this episode is, I mean, I think a lot of people are probably not understanding
Yeah.
of what the industry is,
Right.
because like I said, yeah, at the beginning is like all these students think they want to do concept art, except they have no clue where their skills fit. So for a concept artist who's starting out or going to graduate school or studying in school, they might look at it and go, well, you know what? I fit much more with visual development, so I'm going to go in that route. At least they'll
Right.
know now, kind
Yeah,
of like,
exactly.
okay, where does that fall? Or, hey, I really want to do magic cards. Okay,
Right.
there is a future in that. Okay, so I'm not going to look into realistic stuff, film. It's just an
Yeah.
information so that they can kind of go, okay, now I have I want to do live action and I have to do all that. Well, okay, let me consider
Yeah,
what
no,
I
that's
need.
good. It's good. Yeah, you have a better idea. You're more clearly focused. And yeah, I hope this whole overview was helpful. I think it was very helpful to me actually to hear more about the union and hear more about all the kind of different things
Well, I
involved.
think it'll help somebody hopefully, and
I
even
bet it
just
will.
recently I was talking to some people who are experienced and they're like, well, I want to hear more about the union, and so
Right.
you talk about it, and you have a better
Yeah,
idea,
it's
and
a
of
very
course any suggestions, any kind of feedback that things that you guys want to help, just put it in the comments. And we'll always look at them, and we'll find ideas to structure what we do next on that.
Cool. Okay, so let's wrap it up for this episode. As usual, like, comment, and subscribe here on YouTube, or you can also find us on iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts. There's going to be an audio version. Of course, for these episodes, it's going to be a bit more tricky since we have some visuals to show, but I think you still get the gist of it. So thanks for tuning in. Thanks to my co-host here, Emmanuel, and we'll say goodbye until the next one. Thank you.
Yeah, see you guys next time.
Bye.